Hi, this is Shambhavi. Welcome to my weekly podcast about spirituality, love, death, devotion, and waking up while living in a messy world. The Satsang with Shambhavi podcast is recorded live each week with students of our nonprofit community, Jayakula. For more information and to find out about attending a satsang, visit jayakula.org. Thanks for listening. Much love to you, wherever and however you are. So, welcome to everybody, and especially the people who are new. When I was in my mid-20s, I was a skeptical, snarky, atheist, punk rock loving person who thought that they had absolutely no interest in spirituality. And then I was living in New York City, and one day, I really don't even remember what happened or why I did this, but there probably is still there, but there was this center in Soho. I don't remember the name of it, but it was this kind of new agey center. And somehow, the open center, yeah, thank you. So it was really, some place like that was a kind of place I would have really not gravitated toward at the time. And yet somehow, I found out about a workshop there that was called something like Discover Your Intuition. It was completely out of character for me to go to something like that. But I went, and I don't know why I went. So I went, and unbeknownst to me, the teacher was teaching what I now know were classical forms of Kriya Yoga. So working internally with your internal subtle channels, you would call them meridians in the Chinese tradition. We call them nadis, which means river. And she was teaching these very traditional kriyas from the tantric tradition. I had no idea anything about tantra. I didn't even know that what she was teaching me was from India. I mean, I really was a complete know-nothing. And at that time, in the mid-1980s, yoga and things Eastern just really weren't on too many people's, radar. It wasn't like it is now, where there's a yoga studio on every corner, and there's sort of, you can go into Walgreens and buy yoga mats, and it really wasn't like that at all. I really didn't know anything about it. I had never taken a yoga class. I didn't know anything. But what happened was I simply fell madly, deeply in love with what she was teaching. Having no name for it, not knowing where it came from, I just loved it. Now, a prior actual experience that I had, which kind of prepared me for this, but I didn't realize it till much later, was that when I was in high school, I went to this very alternative, hippy-dippy high school. One of my teachers became enamored of the work of Wilhelm Reich, who was an Austrian who studied under Freud and who was pretty much the first Westerner to introduce body work into psychotherapy. And so this biology teacher taught a little seminar at our hippy-dippy high school in the work of Wilhelm Reich. And I was completely entranced with it. And I got a little job waiting tables. And I signed up for Reichian therapy at the age of 15. And met this absolutely fantastic woman named Fiora Raggi. She was from Italy, and she had been a veterinarian and also a freedom fighter against Mussolini and fascism in World War II. And she wrote science fiction, and she was kind of a Renaissance person. And she introduced me. It was the first time I'd ever been in any kind of psychotherapy, and it was all directly working with the energy in your body. So I had kind of had that preparation, but I didn't really put it together. Anyway, so I started studying with this teacher in New York, and I studied with her for a couple years, and then I moved to California. And about a week after I arrived in California, I saw a flyer sitting on a table somewhere for somebody who was teaching something about the chakras. And at that point, I knew that word, and we had been working with the chakras in this workshop, and then subsequently when I was studying with this teacher in other places. And so I went to this chakra workshop and was completely turned off. There was, people calling themselves Moonbeam, and, it was just really, I was just, really this edgy black eyeliner wearing New York 20-something-year-old. I just couldn't deal with this. But again, I really there was something about the teacher that I really liked. And it turned out the teacher is somebody maybe some of you have heard of. Her name is Anadea Judith. She's sort of like I wouldn't say she's not totally New Agey, but she's not really a classical Tantra teacher or a guru in any way. She's sort of in the middle there somewhere. But she's a very good teacher. So I studied with her for many, many years. And she was actually the first person who told me that what I was studying was A, from India, and B, was called Tantra. And both of these things were news to me. I was like, really? Really? So after I heard that it was from India, and I went to the library, and I got out a book called The History of India. It was like this thick. And I was completely overwhelmed. I just, India was just not anything I had considered. I was reading Russian novels and surrealist poetry, and I just wasn't. India just didn't figure in my life. But anyway, from that point on, I spent 10 years reading about the tradition, about the classical tantric tradition, which is called Trika, and the older name for it is Trika, and then a more recent name for it is Kashmir Shaivism. So there's a few different tantric traditions in India that are considered classical traditions, but one of them is this tradition that largely comes from Kashmir, the Kashmir Valley in North India, and then what is now Pakistan, which used to be India. So like the Swat Valley in Pakistan and other places in that sort of northwest area of India. And by that time, I realized that I needed a guru if I wanted to be in this tradition. I was in graduate school, and I ended up writing my dissertation in part about this tradition. And I, found a teacher who was actually in a lineage. But it was a funny situation because I had come at this through Kriya Yoga and through doing very traditional kinds of practices. And when I went to look for a teacher, I went on the internet and I plugged in the word Tantra, and then all of a sudden all this stuff came up about orgasms. And, I was kind of like a babe in the woods. I really didn't know about this stuff. But I knew that wasn't what I was studying. So this is by way of just letting some of you who don't know me know a little bit about how I got here. And basically my whole life I've just followed where my, you could say, wisdom heart was pointing. So even though, back then in my mid-20s, when I was thinking of myself as not very spiritual and thinking of myself as an atheist and, being kind of not interested in all this stuff, when I met a teacher, my first teacher, and did these kriyas, because I love them, I just did it. I didn't really care that maybe it was a little new agey or, I kind of just followed along. And that's really how I've gotten everywhere in my life, just by following that instinct. Even if maybe it's not like 100% in tune with what I think I am, there's that heart of wisdom that is leading you on. And eventually I found a lineage teacher and met many great teachers and got really deep and authentic instruction in spiritual practice. and ended up, really devoting my entire life to this. So Tantra, what I want to talk about tonight is just a little bit about what this tradition is, so, as a way of orienting people. And then in the coming weeks, I'm going to give other talks related to an introduction to what are the practices of this tradition, what is the view of this tradition. And then after each talk, we'll have what's called Satsang. So have any of the new people ever participated in Satsang? You ever heard that word? Or yeah, so the word Sat means reality or existence itself. And so Satsang means being in reality together, or coming together and being in reality. The ending Sang is like, for those of you that have been around for us, like Sangam, like confluence. Right? So Satsang is probably the oldest form of practice in this tradition, or any Indian tradition. It's just when you get together with a teacher and you talk and ask questions and have a conversation. And in fact, in India, satsangs are usually very messy. There's kids running around and people eating and laughing and music playing, and it's very noisy and, kind of chaotic in a friendly way. I've really cultivated that in our community. We just moved here from the West Coast, and we have a community of about 60 people in Portland, Oregon. And, at first when everybody came to satsang, they'd be all like, holy schmoly. And they still are to some degree. It's really hard to get that out of people. But now things are more relaxed, and there's kids, and everyone's having a good time. So satsang is where you come to experience something of what it would be like if you were more enlightened. There's a kind of an alchemy that happens that can't really be explained when you are in this kind of a situation and sitting with someone who's a little more awake than you are. There's some kind of an alchemy that can happen where you just experience a deeper level of relaxation, or some moment where you get in touch with something that it really is showing you an aspect of yourself that usually remains hidden in our everyday life because we're so busy and distracted with everything. So the satsang is a spiritual practice. And my Satguru, which means the guru, Satguru is your main guru, the guru who is the one who is able to show you what reality is, has that same word Sat in it, existence. So the Satguru is the one who shows you what is existence, what is reality, in fact. So my Satguru, Nanamayama, only taught through satsang. She didn't give any other kinds of teachings other than through question and answer and satsang. And she said that satsang is a practice like water dripping on a stone. It's slow, it's steady, but we always know that water trumps stone. Water always wins over stone, even though stone is very hard. And eventually, as she says, the water will break through the stone and start flowing freely through. So the water, of course, is an analogy for your awakening. So I do give a talk at every satsang, but usually fairly brief. Tonight's will be a little bit longer. And then after the talk is over, you can ask any questions you want about anything at all, as long as it doesn't involve mathematics. But people ask questions about me, they ask questions about the tradition, they ask questions about spirituality that they've been wondering about your own practice, about your life, about your relationships, about your health. Any kind of question that you want to ask, you can ask. And if I can't answer it, I'll just say, I don't know. But it's really kind of a free-for-all, and it's up to everybody who comes what the flavor of it is going to be. And then we also sometimes chant and sometimes do mantra or KIRTAN or other kinds of practices. So it's really whatever arises in the moment. Does anybody want to ask any questions about me at this moment before I go on? No question is too out there.
How did you get into Ayurveda and all this?
Well, Ayurveda has been taught to me, so Ayurveda and some form of naturopathic medicine, by every lineage teacher that I've had. And it's been taught as part of our practice, part of our spiritual practice, where we're working with our physical body and our energy and our minds through Ayurveda in order to make it easier for us to realize when we do other kinds of practices like mantra and meditation. So Ayurveda forms kind of the base of the practice upon which everything else is supported. Ayurveda is a vast and beautiful tradition that teaches us how to relate to our bodies in an everyday way with some wisdom, using the tools that we have in our everyday lives, our routine, our daily routine, our seasonal routine, the foods that we eat, common household spices. There's Ayurveda, like any other naturopathic tradition, has a deep and wide aspect of self-care, where you're just learning how to be taking care of a human body. And so that's the context in which we learn Ayurveda, and in which we use it to support our spiritual practice. In addition to that, I also studied Ayurveda in what's called a Gurukul situation, where you're studying with someone who's more experienced in a one-on-one type of a way. And I was an apprentice in an Ayurvedic clinic for 6 months. I don't do clinical practice. I sometimes work with my students in a quasi-clinical way. But mostly I just teach people about the 5 elements, how to work with the 5 elements, how to deepen your relationship to the 5 elements, and how to work with Ayurveda to take care of yourself and support your spiritual practice. So that's the focus of the teaching that I do in Ayurveda. Mm-hmm. So Tantra started in India as a village tradition of working with nature. It's a very direct tradition of working with nature and having the real situation of who you are and what this reality is be revealed to you through personal practice. In India, Tantra came to be seen. Tantra is really the indigenous practice of India. It's all based on the 5 elements, and it's all based on a very direct relationship with yourself, with wisdom or divinity, if you want to call it that, and with the elements of nature. It came to be seen as an oppositional tradition in India because some of the ways that Tantra is practiced were in opposition to what is considered now to be more mainstream Hinduism, where there's a lot of prohibitions around class and caste and gender. So Tantra was seen and still is practiced as a spiritual technology, something that helps you to wake up and discover who you really are, that is for everyone, that has something to offer to anyone, regardless of their station in life or their gender. And even in some respects, at some levels, without regard to having capacity, because there's so many different ways you can approach the tradition with having many different capacities as a person. In mainstream, what's considered to be mainstream Hinduism, Advaita Vedanta or Vedanta or the Sankhya tradition, there are many prohibitions against women practicing in certain ways, people of certain classes and castes practicing in certain ways. And the Brahmin class in India, the upper priestly class in India, see themselves as the ritualists, the only ones who can conduct certain kinds of rituals and They see themselves as the mediators of a relationship with the divine. Whereas in Tantra, you don't need a mediator. You can relate directly without a mediator. So Tantra has several different geographical areas in India where it's flourished as a classical tradition, not forms of Tantra that are like what we think of in this country as neo-Tantra, the kind of stuff that I discovered when I searched for it online. So what I'm talking about are the more indigenous classical traditions of India, where the practices are mantra and meditation and puja, working with Kriya Yoga or Kundalini Yoga. And I'll get into a little more what the practices are. So the major sites of tantric practice in India are northwest India, Kashmir, and now what is Pakistan. And then in northeastern India, in Bengal and Bangladesh, which used to be also part of India. So my Sakuru is actually, she was from India, but she was from the part of India that is now Bangladesh. That part of India is much more focused on what's called Shakta practice, where the goddess or the female incarnation of the divine is very important to people's practice. In the traditions that I have practiced in, also in addition to the goddess being important, also a male representation of reality called Shiva is also very important. These are all just personifications of reality itself. And then in South India, there's a huge tantric tradition, some of which is called Sri Vidya, where another form of reality called Lalita Tripura Sundari is the main deity that's worshipped. And then also there are tantric traditions in South India where Vishnu, I don't know if you know, Vishnu is one of the main three, Vishnu, Brahma, and Shiva. So there are Vaishnavite or forms of Tantra where Vishnu is kind of the head honcho. So the word, Tantra started in India, but it has really spread all over the world. So first of all, in the 8th century, it spread into Tibet. There was an Indian Buddhist named Padmasambhava who was an extremely realized person. And he was invited by the king of Tibet, of one of the provinces of Tibet, to come to Tibet because the king had realized that Buddhism was a civilizing and calming factor, and Tibet was extremely aggressive and chaotic. So this king wanted Padmasambhava to come to Tibet and kind of create cultural Buddhism there and make things more organized in Tibet. And Padmasambhava said, no way am I going. I'm not going to your barbaric country. But eventually he did go, and he walked through Kashmir, and there was a great synergy and kind of wave of Tantra from North India going into Tibet via Padmasambhava. There are a lot of similarities between Tibetan Tantra, which is called Vajrayana Buddhism, and this tradition. And then Tantra also moved into China and Japan and other countries in Asia, and eventually became a worldwide phenomenon with some forms of Tantra practiced in all different countries. And now today we have something called Neo-Tantra, which really isn't Tantra at all, but it borrows some of the words and trappings of classical Tantra. That's a different topic. The word Tantra means to expand your mind. And it doesn't mean that your little self, expands your mind. It means that you relax so that the feeling of separation that you have between your mind and God's mind disappears. And so you discover this pervasive, continuous awareness. And that's what you are. You are that awareness and its energy, which is called Shakti. So the reality, the base of our existence is awareness and energy. And when we relax our bodies and we relax our individualized sense of self, and when we relax our minds, then it seems that we expand. But really what we're doing is just rediscovering that continuity with everything. So this is really the most important view of the tradition, that we're rediscovering through doing certain kinds of practices. We're relaxing our sense of separation. Right now we have all different experiences that result from the fact that we believe we're separate individuals. We are defensive and protective of our individuality. We are aggressive if we feel threatened. We experience very deep loneliness because of our conviction that we are separate. And when that sense of separation begins to relax, the whole point of doing any practice in this tradition is to relax your sense of separation. And when that sense of separation begins to relax, that loneliness begins to subside, aggression begins to subside, all of our fixations, our different tensions begin to relax, our karmas begin to relax, our habitual patterns, and we begin to discover Tantra, we begin to discover continuity with everything. And for most of us that happens very slowly over time. But that's really the whole point of the practice. Other kinds of meanings of the word Tantra is a text. So you might have heard talk about the Tantras. The Tantras are actually ancient texts that are dialogues between the female and the male aspect of reality, Shiva and Shakti. Do you want something you are uncomfortable? I don't like a discomfort in any way. Would you like to sit in a chair? You're okay. Okay, well let us know if we can do anything to make you more comfortable. Okay. So those tantras were written by teachers and are mainly teaching texts for students. They have discussions of philosophy and discussions of particular practices in them. Tantrikas are people who practice in the tradition. That's another use of the word Tantra. So, one thing about this tradition is that it's not a religion. And the reason that I say that, I mean, you might be thinking, but you have gods and goddesses, how could this not be a religion? The main reason I say that it's not a religion is because belief and faith are considered to be obstacles in this tradition. My teacher always said that each person must find out about reality for themselves. She would give a teaching and she would say, now you go find out. And the tradition gives us very concrete methods to find out. Faith and belief are what we do when we are giving up, in some respect, the job of finding out for ourselves. If you say, oh, I believe you, or I believe in some deity, or I have faith in such and such an idea or a spiritual concept, then you're basically just sitting back and saying, I'm not going to find out about it for real, I'm just going to believe in it, or I'm just going to have faith in it. And in this tradition, that is considered to be a great obstacle. This tradition is called a direct realization tradition, and there are other direct realization traditions too. So direct realization means that we are doing certain things so that we can actually, for real, find out about reality for ourselves beyond a doubt. Beyond doubt, beyond faith, beyond belief. The other direct realization traditions that I know about are the Dzogchen tradition of Tibet, which is another tradition that I study in, it's actually the only other tradition I've studied in. And the tradition of Chan Buddhism from China, and some forms of Taoism, where we're having an experience of reality for ourselves that is so incontrovertible. We have that experience, and through having that experience, we actually know who we are and what this reality is. And we have no use for believing in something or having faith in something. So that is the meaning of direct realization. So that is why I say it's not a religion. The term that I yet like to use more, and this isn't something that's written about in ancient texts or anything, just something that I made up, basically, is calling it a spiritual technology. Because you're given very direct and usable tools to discover for yourself what is actually going on here. And that is actually why now I know I was actually a spiritual seeker from day one, even though I thought I wasn't. Because from the time I was extremely young, I just wanted to know what the heck is going on here. What is really happening here? I knew from a very, very young age that what I was seeing and what I was experiencing and what I knew was extremely limited. I knew there was so much more to reality than I was experiencing. And it frustrated the heck out of me. I was really pissed off about it. And I tried to find the answer in science. I was a science major in college. And I tried to find the answer in lots of different ways. Or I tried to find out about reality. It wasn't like an answer, but I tried to find out about reality in many different ways. And when I found this tradition, I knew that this was actually going to fulfill that desire to find out what is happening here. Who are we? What is really going on? And how does it all work? Because undertaking a direct realization practice is not just about understanding something in an intellectual way. It is about having a usable relationship with existence, with a wider experience of existence than you can even imagine. So that's why it is beyond doubt, because it's usable. It's like you can go like this with your arm. It's beyond a shadow of a doubt that you can do this. Well, in the same way, you come to be able to work with reality in a much more concrete way, a wider reality. And that's why you don't really need any belief or faith to do this. You just do it. Chogyam Trungpa Rinpoche is a Buddhist teacher. Have you heard of him?
That's the practice.
Oh, cool. So, did you ever read the book, The Mahasiddha and His Idiot Servant? No. Well, it's a book about Trungpa. It was a memoir. Trungpa was a great practitioner, teacher from the 20th century. And he was very realized. He was in a terrible car accident, and he was semi-paralyzed on one side of his body. So he needed help just getting dressed and shaving and stuff. And he had this student who was serving as kind of a valet. And one time he and the student were in the bathroom. The student was helping him shave and stuff. And all of a sudden, they were looking in the mirror, and all of a sudden Trungpa disappeared. His reflection disappeared. And the student said to Trungpa, "How do you do that?" And Trungpa said, "I don't know, I just do it." So like this, when we do this, we couldn't really explain how we do this, but we know how to do it. We know how to work with our arm. We just do it. It's exactly the same thing. So being realized or being enlightened is just having a bigger, usable relationship with reality. And that's the fruit of the practice. Having that bigger, usable relationship. Let's see what else I want to say here. These are notes from a few different teachings, never fear. I'm not going to go on for hours. So I want to say some things that are common to all classical tantric traditions, both in India and Tibet, and in general, wherever in the world this tradition has, some tradition related to this has been preserved. First of all, an understanding that reality, that everything that we're experiencing is real and not illusory. So you'll hear in other Indian tradition contexts that this world is an illusion. And in this tradition and the other direct realization traditions, what you'll hear is everything here is a real experience. It's just not the whole picture. What our experience in our limited capacity when we're not yet very realized, it's just not the whole picture. But it is real. And that it's nonsensical to say that things are not real. So the person who wrote about this very eloquently from this tradition in Kashmir said that, non-reality can't exist. There's no point even talking about it. And that everything here is a real experience. And we should just start from that. That really makes much more sense. It's just a limited experience. Another thing that's common to all these traditions is the non-exclusivity of the practice, that anybody who has the capacity to do it can do it, regardless of where they come from. And then that we can come to know ourselves by working with the elements of our everyday life. This comes out of the understanding that everything here is being produced by the same consciousness and energy. There's no division or gap between ordinary and spiritual. Everything is, as my teacher said, everything is that. Everything is that consciousness and energy. And so we can use everything and anything to help us to realize. So there's a great emphasis in this tradition on working with our ordinary lives, working with whatever is around us to help us to realize. And then a very important aspect of all these traditions is the understanding that being self-realized and enjoyment are not mutually exclusive. That God, or this reality, is enjoying itself. And that when we realize, we actually come into a kind of divine enjoyment of the creation in the way that someone would enjoy the most spectacular work of art. The relationship between a realized person and reality is a kind of profound aesthetic appreciation. As my Dzogchen teacher always says, we relax and we enjoy. And when he says we relax, he means we relax everything. All of our karmas, all of our fixations, all of our tensions. And then we can enjoy. Now, the final thing that's common, and it relates to this idea of anything can be used to realize, that's common to all these traditions, is that our body is our primary tool for waking up. And that we need to take care of our bodies as best we can in order to support our practice. So one of the things that makes this tradition in India a little bit considered oppositional is because there's not a denigration of the body. There's no idea that the body is degraded or unholy or bad or sinful. And as my teacher said, we have no right not to take care of our bodies. We need them to help us to wake up. And in fact, in the ancient tantras it says, you have been born with this beautiful human body that can do this whole variety of things. In terms of bodies, like if we look at our bodies in comparison to the bodies of animals, We may not do some particular things as well as other beings. Maybe we don't run as fast or see as sharply or smell as well, but we can do a much bigger range of things than most animals. I mean, whales might be smarter than us, but they can't pick up chopsticks and eat sushi. Right? So there's a lot of things that you can't do if you don't have a human body. And so it's said in the tradition, both in Tibet and in India, in the tantric traditions there, that it's best to be born with a human body. Not because human bodies are so great at everything, but because we're like the Jacks and Jills of all trades. And so we can do this huge variety of practices. And that makes it easier for us to self-realize because we have so many choices as to what kind of practice we can do. We can do Hatha Yoga, we can do Kriya or Kundalini Yoga, we can do Puja, we can do Mantra, we can do meditative dance, all different kinds of things, right? Walking meditations, there's so many different kinds of things we can do. And that makes it easier for us, right? It's so easy. Yeah. Satsang with Shambhavi is produced by Jayakula, a nonprofit community offering opportunities to learn and practice in the direct realization traditions of Trika Shaivism and Dzogchen. If you enjoyed listening, please help us keep this podcast and many other teachings open to all by making a monthly or one-time donation. Visit jayakula.org to make a donation and explore more of our offerings.